All right, so my goal when I first start to paint is to identify the two major families, the light family and the shadow family. Hi, welcome to Paint Coach. My name is Chris Fornatero and I'm here to help simplify oil painting so that you can get better faster. So in this video, we're going to be painting some pumpkins. Now my palette for this painting is going to be ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, cadmium lemon, and titanium white. I'm going to be using some linseed oil as my medium, and I'm going to be painting on an acrylic primed linen panel that I've taped off into an 8x-inch square. Now I've toned my canvas with a neutral warm brown. Now this was made by combining all the primaries to get a brown and painting it on with a lot of paint thinner and then wiping it down with a paper towel. Once I did that, I am ready to paint. Now if you want to see the full hour-long version of this painting tutorial, you can find that on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description below. If you sign up for the $9 tier, you'll get access to 40 plus other painting tutorials, and you'll get access to my private Facebook group where you can share your oil painting with me and all my other patrons who are learning to oil paint as well. All right, now it's time to draw in our subject, and I'm actually gonna be using the same brown mixture that I used for the wash. All right, I'm gonna draw the sky in first because in this scene, I find that the sky, getting that accurate little band of sky at the top there doesn't seem that difficult. And whenever drawing, I like to start with the things that aren't that difficult, things that I have more of a chance of getting in accurately. Because if I get it in accurately, then I can use it as a reference point for drawing everything else. And I'm gonna be drawing in straight lines because I find it much easier to get the right shapes when I'm using straight lines opposed to curved lines. It's harder to get a curved line accurate opposed to a straight line. I'll have time to smooth out these harsh lines and get curves as I paint. Okay, once the drawing's done, now I want to jump in with the paint. All right, so my goal when I first start to paint is to identify the two major families, the light family and the shadow family. And I like to start with the shadow family first because I find it easier to build dark to light. So I'm gonna go in and identify the shadows first. And I'm not gonna be painting in with the darkest dark that I find or the lightest light that I find. I'm gonna find an average. I wanna find an average dark that I can then work later and pull out the variations of darks and lights within that shadow. So starting with the sky, I'm gonna mix up some ultramarine blue, titanium white, and actually a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow too. Yes, I'm using all of the colors in this sky. This is gonna be the case pretty much with everything. When you're working with the primaries and white, all the colors are pretty much going to be in every color that you mixed up. And this is going to give your painting color harmony. Now, I always highly recommend that people starting out use just the primaries in white because it keeps things very simple and it will give you a strong foundation of color. So when you do add other colors to your palette, you understand where they come from and where they fall in the whole range of colors. This makes things very simple because when you're mixing up color trying to match it, all you're thinking is, does it need more blue, does it need more red, does it need more yellow, or does it need more white? Okay, so moving to these trees in the background, I'm gonna mix up a bluish green. Now I want these trees to sit far in the background, so I'm going to make sure that I don't put in too much yellow in this bluish green mixture. This is where atmospheric perspective comes into play. If you want to go more in depth with atmospheric perspective, I actually made a video on that and I'll put a link to that right here. But pretty much it's the sense that as you get further in space, certain colors drop out. And the first color to drop out is yellow and then reds, and then you're left with just blues. That's why things far away seem very cool and blue. All right, next is the field. And again, I want to make sure that this isn't too vibrant. I want it to sit in the background. I'm going to save my very vibrant greens for the grass in the foreground. Now, if you struggle with the primaries and understanding them, I actually have a 10-minute video. It's my shortcut to color mixing guide where I explain everything using a color wheel, complement colors, all that good stuff. I show you how to mix any color using the primaries and white. I also show you what extra colors I like to add to my palette as shortcut colors. So if you want to see that video, the link to that is in the description below. All right, now I'm blocking out the shadows of the pumpkins. And now this is a darker orange, so I'm mixing up an orange using my yellow in my red, but I'm desaturating it a little bit with blue. You're going to want to desaturate pretty much every color that you mix up. Very rarely are you going to find a color that is just straight out of the tube. And you desaturate colors with its complement. So I got an orange pumpkin here, and orange's complement is blue. Next, I'm going to do the dark shadow areas of the ground, which is actually a very dark purple. I mix up red and blue and desaturate with a little bit of yellow to get this very dark purple. All right, now it's time to move to the light family. Now I want to block everything in with the darkest light that I can see. I want to start with my darkest light so I can build lighter values on top of that. And I'm starting with the ground here with an orange pinkish color. A good tip when painting ground and dirt is look for a lot of warm colors. There's a lot of warm colors in the ground, especially ground that's close to you. Then I work the light sections of these pumpkins, again, still desaturating my orange with a little bit of blue. So for these lights and the trees in the background, the rule of atmospheric perspective is still going to be in play here. I see a lot of people get this wrong. A lot of people push too many yellows in their trees that are in the distance. They also make their brights way too bright. As objects get further away from you, the contrast between lights and darks gets smaller. So a tree that's very close to you, the shadows and highlights are going to be very far apart from each other, but that same tree far in the distance, the lights and shadows in that tree are going to be closer together in value. So as I mix up these highlights, I don't want to make them too bright, and I actually want to push a little bit more of the red in it than the yellow. Lights of trees in the distance can be tricky and take you a couple times to get it right. All right, now that we have the shadow family and the lights families all identified, it's time to go into each of those and pull out subtle variations. And I recommend bouncing back and forth from shadows to lights, not building one up way more than the other. You always want to be comparing everything in the painting. If you develop one area further along than another area, you run the risk of making a mistake that you're not going to be able to see until all the areas are built up together, and by then it's going to be a big mistake. And you always want to catch mistakes when they're small mistakes because they're a lot easier to fix. And always be stepping back and taking in your painting as a whole. Since I held back on the saturation of the green of the field in the background, it's allowed me to now make this grass in the foreground more saturated and make it sit in the foreground. Now I'm still desaturating this green with a little bit of red, but it's definitely going to have a lot more yellows in it. Again, I'm going to bounce back and forth from lights and shadows and work variations where I see them. I'll talk a little bit about reflected light. It's clear that the main light source is the sun shining on the pumpkin from the right side, but there is also this reflected ambient light, I'm guessing from the sky because it's got a bluish color to it. So I want to make sure that I mix that up. I don't want to make it too bright. I don't want to make it as bright as the main light source, but I definitely want to identify it, and I want to put it in, but not too bright, so everything still reads as the shadows and this reads as reflected light. The most common problem I see with this is people make this way too bright and kind of knocks things out of reading as still in the shadows. Now as I push the lights of the pumpkin, I'm not going to go to pure white. Always refrain from going to pure white. You really want to save that till you absolutely need it. And a lot of times you don't need it in a painting. I'm going to use that cool blue reflected light color to develop the shadows in the ground more by putting in these roots and grass and everything that I see there. Again, you don't want to make this too bright that it knocks it out of reading as in the shadows. I'm also going to work the lights in the lighter sections of the ground but I'm constantly squinting my eyes and making sure that I don't make the ground too bright. I still want my sky to be the brightest plane in this painting, because most of the time in landscapes, your sky is going to be your brightest plane, followed by your ground plane, and then any slanted planes like mountains or hills, and then any upright objects like trees, barns, people, pumpkins are going to be your darkest value. So even though you're adding in lights in the ground that are lighter than the sky, you don't want to put too many of them that it knocks the ground plane as a whole out of its appropriate value zone, which is slightly darker than the sky. Now there's this middle value. It's kind of between the shadow family and the lights family. It's a very bright, vibrant orange. And I'm going to place it in what seems to be between the lights and the shadows. Okay, now it's just a matter of bouncing around and tweaking things that you feel need tweaked. And at this point, I'm constantly stepping back from my painting. I analyze it, I make a couple marks, I step back, I assess those marks, I make another mark. I'm really trying to read the painting as a whole and comparing all the different value and color relationships. Again, if you want to see the full version of this tutorial, you can get that along with 40 plus other painting video tutorials that I have on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description below. And if you like this video, if you like this channel, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting. And you're still here. You made it to the end of the video. That must mean you really like it. May I suggest hitting that subscribe button? I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if you like this video, you'll probably like this video as well.